Good morning.
Good morning.
Is anyone's brain smoky? It was a little smoky this morning. Is it?
It's less smoky.
Not out there, in here. So I had to travel to Japan for some unexpected business, and then I returned on Friday night. So I'm a little bit in the jet lag zone. So I know my normally crystal clear instructions for the Dharma talk may be a little more smoky today, but I think it hopefully will be helpful in some way. So this will be the last in a series of talks that started earlier in the summer, which are titled Ancient and Practical Liberation, in which we've been focusing on one of the oldest teachings of the Mahayana Buddhism, which is referred to as the paramitas, oftentimes translated as perfections. And I've said a lot of times I don't particularly like that translation that much. I prefer talking about it as a crossing over, which is another way of a derivation of the word paramita. It means crossing over or liberation. So sometimes I call them the 6 liberations, sometimes 6 paramitas, sometimes 6 perfections, different words, but they all refer to the same teaching in the Sanskrit, which is paramita. And sometimes there are lists of 6 paramitas, sometimes 10 paramitas, sometimes 8 paramitas. There's versions of paramitas which are used in the Theravadan schools of Buddhism. And so, it's like you have a pie and you're going to cut it some different ways. You can think about it like that. Like there's a whole teaching, and then, you're going to cut it in 8 pieces, 6 pieces. I prefer the half of a pie usually. I'm usually cutting it in 2. But that's a good way to think about it, because sometimes we put too much of a hard edge on certain things and we think, oh, well, this is the practice of generosity, not the practice of patience. But actually, practice of generosity takes a big old dollop of patience. And so really they're all intermingling with each other all the time. So we don't need to be too hard about that. And in these talks I've been focusing particularly on how it is that we see. So these liberations are both animated by, and they animate how it is that we experience the world, or how we are as beings. And classically, this is referred to as the teachings around wisdom, which in Sanskrit is prajna. And so the 6th of those perfections is referred to prajna paramita, or the liberation of wisdom. And it's said that is that 6th perfection or paramita which animates the other 5. It's what makes them liberations. So for example, to practice generosity is a good thing. Buddhism will always support that. Any form of generosity you can practice. But for that practice to become really liberating, in the sense of having the fullest capacity to help us go beyond our narrow way of conceiving of life, which causes a lot of suffering, it has to be animated by this wisdom. Right? And so that wisdom is sometimes also referred to as an eye, like right? The way that you see. Now, not just the visual world, right? But all of our experience. You can think of this eye that the wisdom is about is not just a visual sight, but all of our experience. You could talk about it as consciousness itself. All the different ways that we can be conscious. And we say consciousness, that's such a word, consciousness. It's so like woo. But you can get very concrete about consciousness. Just like, what do you experience? Experience through your mind, through your emotions, your body, your tongue, your ears, your eyes, all of those different ways in which experience comes to you from many different layers of being. That's what consciousness is. Right? So I've been focusing on that, and that's really the classical thing to do with the paramitas, is to focus on this, how it is that we see. And I've been referring to that as clear seeing, just like comes at the beginning of the Heart of Great Perfect Wisdom Sutra. Heart of the Great Perfect Wisdom Sutra, Great Perfect Wisdom, that's Great Prajna Paramita. Okay? So the great wisdom teachings, what's the heart of it? That's what we chant, the first chant that we do on Sunday mornings, Heart of Great Perfect Wisdom Sutra. It says, Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, when deeply practicing Prajna Paramita, or the liberation of wisdom, clearly saw that all five aggregates are empty and thus relieve suffering. So that clear seeing, that's what we're studying when we study the paramitas, when we study the sixth paramita as the animator of all of our practice of Buddhism. And sometimes we can call it clear seeing, but I also prefer to call it the illumination of seeing. That's kind of nice, right? The illumination of seeing. And I'll talk a little bit more about that this morning. So as we've gone through each of the paramitas, the first generosity, the second ethics, the third patience or forbearance, the fourth vigor, and now talking a little bit about meditation, which is the fifth. And all along, we're talking about this wisdom, about this eye of wisdom. So when we talk about meditation, it's really extremely important that we examine it clearly, to develop some clarity about what we're talking about when we say meditation. That's true of all of any teaching, and certainly all of the paramitas. But in this case, there are so many things which are called meditation that if we just think that meditation is a singular thing, which is a kind of universal instruction for what meditation would be like, we're making a mistake. So we need to look at carefully what is meant by meditation. And a couple weeks ago, when I started talking about this paramita, I was going into a little bit of the criticism about many modern teachings about meditation. The meditation is being fit into a particular mindset, which is not exactly where it comes from. And it's not a huge problem in and of itself, but if we want to practice the liberation of Buddhism, then we need to receive the teachings of Buddhism that come along with the meditation, and not think that meditation in and of itself can do without these other teachings, without the broader world of Buddhist teachings. If we're going to practice Buddhist meditation, there's all kind of meditation you can practice, okay? But for the Buddhist meditation, we need the Buddhism, okay? So, to look at it kind of carefully is important, and sometimes this feels a little antithetical to people because they're like, yeah, but meditation is supposed to be about stopping thinking, which is one of the misunderstandings we have about meditation. But it fits very, very cleanly into a story we're telling ourselves about what clear seeing might look like. Like if we could just drop all the baggage, it would be groovy, right? That's not what Buddhism teaches. Buddhism teaches like, there's unbelievable amounts of baggage. Like what you think is your baggage, that's just like, that's not even your carry-on. That's like what's that one? You get the really cheap tickets now and you don't even get a carry-on, you get one personal item. That's your personal item. There's a lot more where that came from. So that's the first thing Buddhism's teaching is it's not that simple of a thing. That in fact, the way you're experiencing things is constantly affected by all of the karma. Okay? And so that kind of simplistic idea about meditation we want to be careful of. So in a classical sense, when we talk about the six liberations too, the fifth meditation has a special connection to this eye of wisdom. One of the classical images that is given is wisdom is like the flame and meditation is like the candle. So the wisdom eye, the how we see, which is completely ungraspable, just like fire. You can't hardly say anything about it because it's before, it's like it's immaterial. There's no way to kind of define it. It's about how it is that we're seeing, not what we're seeing. And usually when we're seeing things or experiencing things, they're objects of our consciousness, right? And this is prior to that. So the flame becomes a kind of image for that, an image for consciousness, image for consciousness itself, not the objects that we're experiencing. And then the body of practice is meditation. So the body of meditation, whether we're sitting in this classical form or on a chair or a bench or sometimes even laying down or walking, all the different ways that we might meditate, that body of practice in meditation, about how we're doing something, we're studying there, but it's very, very, very close, maybe the closest in to being able to then work with what is the frame, what is the eye with which we are looking at things. So this deep association between wisdom and meditation is really classical. That's why in our school, Manjushri Bodhisattva, who's the Bodhisattva of wisdom, is the Bodhisattva which is enshrined in the meditation hall. And here we just have one hall. So usually if you come for the earlier meditation on Sundays or you come on other days, Prajnaparamita's right about where this is there. And then we have a little circle of cushions that are here that we sit in. And that's classical for the meditation hall. So the wisdom, Manjushri. Also, behind me is Prajnaparamita, who is the personification of wisdom. Okay. So I've said a little bit about meditation as the very close or intimate way to work with how we see. Okay? Some Western scholars like to call this, I find this a useful thing, the ultimate frame. What is the framing? What's, like, if you could think of how you frame how you're looking at things, that there is this ultimate frame that's way below our threshold of consciousness, of like being able to see. And that framing is constantly at work. It's constantly determining how it is that we experience everything. And that the intimacy, that framing is one way we could talk about the eye. Okay? It's a way that we're seeing. And that meditation's working with that in a very close and intimate way. So when we sit down for meditation, and you have instruction, gather yourself, put aside your concerns to the degree that you can. I always love when you read the instructions. They're like, don't think about extra stuff. You're like, oh, as if that was just a switch that I had, right? So it's not, no one expects you actually just have that switch. It's just the intention. You say, okay, put aside these different concerns I have. Just put them aside for now. They'll be there when you're done. Guaranteed. You can pick them back up. You don't have to worry. Just set them aside, right? Gather yourself. Gather your physical body. Gather your breath body. It's a good way to think about breath. Not breath as just a thing that your body's doing, but that you have a body of breath, a spirit. That's where that comes from in English, right? Aspiration. Aspirate, spirit, breath. There's a body, a spiritual body, which we could call a breath body. So, your mind, put aside this extra stuff, collect your body, allow your breath. And when you do that, you're going to come right here and you're going to be aware in a way that you're not aware when you're going around doing things. When your consciousness is hooking on to various things that you need to work with that are usually outside of you, but then oftentimes are inside you too. Especially if you're a little bit self-aware person. You're like, someone cuts you off in traffic and you're like, I won't say what I say inside my head when someone cuts me off, but you have that feeling, right? So then you might notice it and you're like, oh, that's not so great, Good, that's good to notice it. Right? But when you come for meditation, then that internal eye and external eye, which really aren't different, but we can experience them different, it comes into a presence which you won't have most of the time. And at this point, there's something very important. If you simply take that consciousness or that awareness, the kind of visual consciousness, as an object, then you're missing the instruction. So it's very easy for us to do that. We sit down and then I go, oh, how am I feeling? And you could sit there for 40 minutes with a whole list about a description of what you're experiencing or how you're feeling about things. Okay? That's not the end of the world. In fact, you will do that. If you're thinking right now, it's like, oh, I do that all the time. Congratulations. We all do that all the time. But what I'm saying is that is a kind of mistake in practice. The purpose of meditation is not to sit and to catalog that or to take yourself, your consciousness, your awareness as an object. we've been talking so much in this investigation of clear seeing about the subject-object relationship, how the way that we experience things gets mired in a kind of really isolation. We suffer from that a lot in an individualistic consumer culture that we live in right now. We're used to being consumers of objects. You know, like the Big Mac style consumer of objects, but also just everything you see, the firm opinions you have about how things are and how they should be, etc. These are all examples of kind of consumption. Very subtle, very constant, and oftentimes not subtle either. Right? So that subject-object relationship, which is at the base of our delusion, which is the opposite of wisdom. Right? Wisdom is trying to teach us to see in a different way, and to see in an illuminated way. That when we're experiencing things, it's not about something over there that is the object of my subjectivity, but that to behold something is to be alive. You're alive and it's alive, you know, even if it's a rock, okay? Or a gum wrapper. I don't know why gum wrapper comes up for me a lot, but that one, I must have had some experience with a gum wrapper at some point that I forgot about. Okay? That everything is really alive. We are beings in a universe of beings. We are not a being in a universe of objects. So right in meditation, you want to be careful about this, because one of the things that we objectify most often is an objectification in this direction. And it comes to you as a kind of assessment about all sorts of things about who you are, opinion about what you're experiencing, etc. My teacher used to say, you know, he gave really great instruction about meditation that was impossible to understand, which is what made it great, but also well, anyway. So he would always say, this is always when he was teaching meditation, he would say, Tenchi Bambutsu Ittai ni naru. The heaven and the earth and the myriad things, the 10,000 things, are one body. That was his instruction for meditation. Not calm down, not like breathe until you feel really chill, not lose your baggage. It was Tenchi Bambutsu. And I say it in Japanese because I just remember him so much, and the Bambutsu, you know, that has a good sound, right? Tenchi Bambutsu. Ittai. And it's very, and then that's how it is, really. Like there is a wholeness of the universe, which we are a complete expression of. That's what meditation is about. Not an object which we're going to shine up, you know, like I'm going to get myself shined up to the point where I'm real bright and perfect. You know? That's actually the objectification of ourself, which causes so much trouble. The whole body of being is involved in this immediate seeing. That's the kind of ultimate frame of a Mahayana Buddhist teaching. That whatever you're seeing, whatever you're experiencing, whatever it is that you're intending towards, the wholeness of being is involved in that. And by the wholeness of it, I mean Tenchi Bambutsu. I mean heaven, earth, all things, all beings are involved in that. And this is exactly what the teachings of emptiness or the teachings of shunyata bring us to. Those are the prajnaparamita teachings, the teachings of wisdom, the teachings about how is it that we cultivate this different way of seeing. The core in that is these teachings of shunyata, or usually translated as emptiness, which is a little like heavy, right? On a, what do we call that? Existential level. Right? We're not so up for the emptiness. It seems like a problem. But actually in Buddhism, well, I told this joke. Some of you will hear it a lot of times, but I'll tell it again because some of you haven't heard it. My teacher only ever told me one joke. He said, "Oh, Ejo, what's the difference between Buddhists and nihilists?" And I said, "I don't know, teacher." And he said, "We're happy about it." And then he laughed really loud. That's not, don't take that joke too literally. It's not actually, the whole philosophy is very different. But this idea that an emptiness or that there's not an enduring self, that's like the good news of Buddhism, right? It's not the actual, it's the good news and not the kind of disappointment. Yeah. So in these teachings of emptiness, as I've been expressing them in these talks, I've been giving 5 flavors. I just remember, there are many, many flavors. If you go and read the Prajnaparamita Sutras, there's a list, there are pages. There's like a page of 1,000 different flavors. It's usually called concentrations, different samadhis or different concentrations. And they have beautiful names, not so beautiful as the ones I've been giving you. Okay, but the 5 that I've been focusing on are, the first one is already broken. Isn't that beautiful? Yeah. Already broken. That whatever it is that you experience, anything that any phenomena, it's not what you think it is, which is good news, by the way. Right? What you could think it is unbelievably inferior to its actual splendid face. And it won't last in the way that you conceive of it. So that's the first. That's a very classical, oftentimes framed in a disappointing sort of way, but actually is a wonderful kind of enlivening teaching. The second is that all things are interconnected. So whatever it is that we experience, it's always doesn't happen in isolation. We might see the front of it, but all the part we can't see is all these tendrils in different places. That really we don't have an independent, this is the third flavor, is we don't have an independent place to stand. We can't stand apart from it all and observe it. Although, as a Buddhist meditator, you probably do that a lot. You probably have that kind of third person position down pretty well, It's a kind of good place to chill out, right? Which, I'm not criticizing that as a strategy. Sometimes you need that. You need to get outside of the washing machine. As someone said to me once, they feel like, I'm in the front load washer. I just need to get out of the front load washer. And we worked for a long time. They got out of the front load washer, or they got the capacity to step out of the front load washer. And then I was working with him. He came in. He says, I feel disconnected. I was like, well, yeah, because your life's in the washer. So you can't just hang out and wash the front load washer. You got to actually go back in. And so that's true. It's a strategy. Sometimes you need the perspective. You need some room, and you do that. But then the re-engagement with your life is important. We don't really have an independent place to stand. Right? And if we just remove ourselves from difficulty, we'll find that our life is continually diminished. That the capacity to be in connection with difficulty, which we studied a lot when talking about forbearance, that is pivotal to being able to work with the way that we see things. That wisdom. And then the fourth flavor we talked about is the as-it-isness. Now this is something that is such a beautiful quality of meditation. If you take it up regularly, especially if you sometimes come to maybe a one-day meditation that we have here, Zazenkai, or you come to a sesshin, which is like a longer a meditation retreat. If you're ever interested in that, I really encourage you to take part in it. There's a way in which the heart and mind can quiet, and the world as it is. Now the as it isness, this is a little bit tricky concept, which I'm going to talk about here in a second. But things are just simple. They're just present. And you don't have to put them outside or inside or in relation to anything else. You can just appreciate them in the very simple way that they are. And then the last flavor, true meeting, that we lose the need to be in control of what it is that we're perceiving. And in that point, we can meet something as opposed to consuming it. Yeah? That's another one of the flavors. So when we talk about meditation and we talk about this wholeness of being, that everything is this one body of awakening that is expressed through our consciousness, it's very different than trying to say, okay, my mind is an object and I'm going to try to clean it up until I can see things the way that they're supposed to be seen. This is probably, my estimation, the biggest problem with the standard version of explanation of what meditation is in our society today. People think of it as like, I've got glasses on, the glasses are kind of oily or they've got some junk on them, and I just need to polish up the glasses and put them on, and then I'll see things how they actually are, and I'll be liberated. That way of thinking about it is not right. And it's a little bit, it doesn't at first seem violent, but it is a little violent. It is a little like kind of, if I could just cut out part of my being, then it would be okay. That's where it starts to head. And the way that we're meditating can be very kind of just kind of whipping ourselves in some way. But it's good because we have some instructions about that. Very clear. Right from the very beginning of the Zen school in China, there was a kind of revolution. And that revolution was called Chan, or in Japanese Zen, as a way of thinking about meditation that is not so subject-object oriented like that. And it shows up for us in one of the very early teachings that I bring up again and again, and it's about the poem that the sixth ancestor wrote. So the sixth ancestor was Bodhidharma, was the first teacher, is considered the first Zen ancestor, and came to China from India and brought the lineage. And then there's the second ancestor, third ancestor, fourth ancestor, fifth ancestor, sixth ancestor. So the Daikon Eno is his name in the Japanese pronunciation of the characters. That ancestor became the ancestor through which all of the different Zen schools sprung. So there's usually, you might hear something like the 5 houses of Zen. So there's those 5 dominant lineages. There were more lineages, but those were the 5 that really were the dominant lineages of Zen. And that he was seen as the ancestor of all of those, and really focused on as being this important, this very important teacher that established our way. And his legend is really interesting. He was a woodcutter, very, very poor family. He just lived with his mother, and he would go to the woods, cut wood, bring it to the village, and then sell firewood, and that's how they would make a little bit of money to be able to survive. And it's said that one day when he was in the city selling wood, the 5th ancestor was giving a public Dharma talk. And I always think about this. I always think about like a Saturday market. I was like, we could do this. But you just think the teacher comes, they set up, and then they give a teaching. So he was there selling firewood, and he was listening to the teaching, and the teacher was teaching on the Diamond Sutra, which is one of the core Prajnaparamita texts. And it said that this boy had a kind of insight. And this is so cool. Like for a long time I was like, well, it's a legend, and And then I just met people like this. They're like 7 and they're like, and they say something and you're like, oh my gosh. Here I've been slaving away at this for how long, and I got this like little bit, and then this person just, they see right through it. And this was the case with the sixth ancestor. And so he had to resolve to become a monk. He went to the monastery of the 5th ancestor. He entered the monastery. He wasn't allowed to enter as a monk. He was young, and also the way of monastic ordination at that time was complicated. A lot of involvement with the government, money, every religion has its stuff, right? So he was there as kind of a kitchen helper, and he would work in the kitchen, and he would make food, which is also kind of beautiful in the legend. Like that was his basic job, was this nourishing of the fire and nourishing of the community. Very noble job, which was underappreciated probably, right? And so the 5th ancestor is getting ready to pull back. He probably knows he's going to kick the bucket. And he's like, got to figure out who's going to be the next abbot of the temple and take care of the community in a spiritual sense. And so he says, he points to the wall and he says, anyone who has a poem to express your awakening, write it here on this wall. And I'll choose the best one. And that person will become my heir. And so this becomes, these 2 poems that come out of that, this becomes really important for us to study about what is this Zen meditation. The first one's by the the monk's name was Jinshu in the Japanese reading, and he was expected to be the heir. And so he writes the first poem up. And this is kind of loose translation. I'm always changing the translation a little bit. But it goes like this. Body is the Bodhi tree. Mind like a bright mirror on a stand. Time and again, wipe it diligently. Don't let it gather dust. Really beautiful expression of awakening. The body, like I remember before, I would say the body of practice. The body of practice, like the candle, right? With this bright mirror of mind, this flame, just very direct reflection of all being, which is the mind. I mean, like, isn't it kind of amazing? You can just like look over here and it's like the whole world comes into existence. You can look over here, the whole world comes into existence, just like a mirror. Everything's just right there. And he said, just take care of it. Diligently wipe it and don't let all this extra stuff come in and get it. So everyone saw this. They said, oh, Jinshu, of course, he's great. He's going to be the next abbot. I'd have appointed him as the next abbot. But who became the sixth ancestor was there. And by this time, he'd been there for a while. He was older, but he still couldn't read. And so he asked one of the other monks. He said, read what Jinshu wrote up there. And he read. He heard, and he was like, no, that's all wrong. He said, write this up there on the wall. And so he asked him to write for him. The Bodhi's not originally a tree, or awakening is not originally a tree. The bright mirror has no stand. Fundamentally, there is not a single thing. Where could dust fall? Which is obviously the better poem. And the fifth ancestor could tell that. But we study both of these poems because they're both important. The fifth, who was to become the sixth ancestor, Jinshu, he went and established another line of Zen, right? If you study the history of it, probably the whole legend is a polemic based on the sixth ancestors, you know. They're making up a story, right? Which is a good story, so we should appreciate it. But the fifth ancestor, he kept going. That's beautiful teaching. We should respect our body and the mind that's there and the cleaning it. But the problem there is it's very easy for us to objectify it. We think there's a mirror that is apart from the rest of the world. And what the sixth ancestor pointed to, he was like, there's no dust, people. There's nothing that escapes the mirror, which means there's nothing could land on it. There's no way that the kind of objectification of the mirror, the kind of fetishizing of the mirror, the kind of like, if I could just get my mirror clean enough, then I would be worthy of some peace of mind. That's not what we're doing. That actually a constant encounter of the mirror, that's what polishing is. Not getting rid of the dust, but being willing to look into the mirror. Being willing to look again and again into the mirror and from the mirror. That is what we call keeping it clean. So in a way, he was just teaching the same thing as the fifth ancestor, but he's teaching it a little bit more strict. He's being a little more strict about about what this polishing is about. Now again, the reason that I bring this up is because we are so inclined to use meditation as a way to make our consciousness or our being kind of an object of our project. And this teaching really points us at another way. That whatever current consciousness that is happening, it's not always going to be like that. It's always going to be changing. And what you think it is not what it is. So you can't just try to beat it into shape. It's not going to respond that way. You have to respect it. You have to respect it as something which is interdependently arising constantly. That you don't get to stake out your terrain to protect, but that you have to care for something. And to the extent that you can care this direction, you can care this direction. that those are always happening. Those are happening together. And I would say finally that because of the particular conditions which we are in right now, and in which meditation tends to get emphasized as a kind of technique for cleaning up the problems of life, it's particularly important that we practice meditation in conjunction with generosity, ethics, forbearance, vigor, and wisdom. Because this is what allows the meditation to come into its fullness. We don't just practice meditation in isolation from those other teachings, but we have to see those other teachings as being integral to whatever is going to be really helpful for meditation. And I would say beyond that, depending on your kind of your interest, your spiritual constitution, what you feel comfortable with, the whole tradition offers a lot. I was thinking about this morning when we're preparing for the chanting assembly, and Issei hit the bell. You know, Yuton was in here hitting the bell, gong, gong, and then I heard the bell, ding. She hit the bell. So she's coming out to meet me and the Jisha. We're three of us are out there, right? And I was like, oh, this is meditation. We don't have to wait till later to meditate. And that's how everything is in the way that the temple is articulated, is to try to call our attention to the total interdependence, the total as-it-isness, also the complete incapacity to do it right. All of those things are there in the practice that we share together, just in the way that a bell is rung, or the way we greet each other, or the way we have coffee after assembly. That's all part of how we study meditation. It's not just within the confines of the beginning of bell and the end of the bell like that, or whatever app you might have to make it function. Isn't it funny, those apps? I don't mean funny bad. I just mean, isn't it funny? Like the thing that sucks your consciousness out of your head constantly is now willing to provide you an opportunity to turn it around. I see, take advantage of it. I always used to think it would be great to have a little, something to time meditation for. We used to have a little CD you could put in, and then the CD would, it's basically the same thing, CD would, but we had the 20-minute side and the 40-minute side. It was cool like that. So anyway, I won't bag on the cell phones too much, but just to say that now there's an app, you can get, and we'll give you some episodes. And I've heard many people getting very good results with that. So the reason that I bring it up is to lampoon it a little bit, because I do think it's funny, but also to say, hallelujah, if that works in your life, if that helps you, use it. But as you're using it, just notice that it might have an implicit, or you might infer a certain quality of what that meditation is about. Like, oh, if I could get my 20 minutes in every day, then, I could beat myself into shape. So watch for that. Watch for that, because the way that way of understanding meditation can really do something. Just like at the temple, you can come and it might be implied in the way things are done, or you might infer in the way things are done that there's something wrong with you and you're not pure enough, for example. A lot of people have that experience with religious ritual and those kind of things, right? So you have to work on that. You have to say, okay, is that what's being implied, or is this what I'm inferring? That's not the point, And you have to find your way with the meditation, not just take that kind of in whatever understanding you're coming with, and work with that. That's what we're supposed to do. Any questions or comments?
Dogen, in his universal instructions of yada yada yada, I think he said something about Zazen being the joyful
Dharma gate of joyful ease.
Dharma gate of joyful ease.
Yeah.
So where does the joyful ease part come in?
Constantly. Yeah.
So, and I say that because sometimes sitting feels like work, and other times it doesn't. And I also think about grasping, grasping at the thought. Sometimes I'm like, oh yeah, it's a cloud. I'm just gonna, let it float about and then go. And then other times, depending on the thought, I'm like, oh, I'm grabbing onto that, and I don't have a choice about whether I let go of it or not. The things that are easiest to let go of are the things that are pleasurable. And then the more difficult things are the things that I want to analyze and grasp. But I understand that, you still have to let it go. How can I sit in a way where I'm not trying to control that?
So if we think about that teaching, usually when we hear it, we go, Dharma gate of joyful ease, sweet, object. There's a Dharma gate, which is joyful and easy, and I'm going to do that one. Right, that's the way we hear it, right? Which is that's great. In fact, it's even designed. But then when you go to actually meet that gate, the gate is going to teach you about joy and ease, which is not always an experience of joy or ease. It is the gate of joyful ease. It's a gate which is helping you to learn about what joyful ease is. And then and so the method itself is a method of joy and ease, as opposed to a method of kind of let's destroy the bad stuff to get to the good stuff. Now, that doesn't mean that it will be easy. It takes work. I would say that's another one of the kind of delusions of the sort of consensus view, general kind of projection about what meditation is that my birthright is to not suffer and to be at ease, and if I could just calm down a little bit, I would claim my birthright of not suffering and being at ease. That's exactly the opposite of the message of Buddhism. Your birthright is lots and lots of baggage.
Just don't say suffering.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's not that I'm going to meditate so that I can detach myself from suffering. I'm going to meditate so that I can counter suffering in the profound way which is liberating. And that's the point of meditation. And so we want to, in this practice of the Dharma gate of joyful ease, we want to encounter the very, very nitty-gritty difficulties of a human life and realize that nitty-gritty difficulty of human life does not stand in the way of joy or ease. And that's where we're tethered. We think it's like, if it's difficult, there's no joy or ease. I need to get rid of the difficulty to have joy or ease. But it's actually the opposite. Even in a practical sense, if you look around at people around the world who are having a hard time, who don't live in the ridiculous abundance that we live in, look at their smiles, And then you go over to whatever place you like to get your food, and everyone's kind of scowling at like, you mean this is only 30% organic? It's kind of ridiculous. I remember one time I was at the Sun River with my parents got a place over there, and my brothers and everything, we got together and we were doing it, and we were there walking. People have been to Sun River before, and there's kind of a central shopping area there, and my wife and I went to get some things to make dinner, and we were walking around, and we were kind of like, we were both just a little uncomfortable, and I looked at her and she said, why does everyone look so miserable? And I thought, because we're in like this weird abundance. You're in this place where people don't know what to do with themselves except for like go buy expensive wine and go skiing. Like that's kind of like we're there to titillate, and that's just not satisfying. And so I love vacation. Again, I love vacation. I like to go to Sun River. I like expensive wine. I like the boats. I like all that stuff. But our orientation around it's just wrong. We think that's what's going to fulfill, but it's not. And we think that's what joyful ease is about, and it's not. Joyful ease is about a fundamental orientation in which the difficulty and the elevation are not split into two. And so that's where wholeness comes from. A regular practice of meditation can help us know that. It's not something we can just conceptualize and force ourselves into. It's something that has to come from that willingness to encounter again and again. So, yeah, it's always a little joke. Yeah, joyful ease. Yeah, Dharma gate joyful ease. Hi.
Could you speak a little bit about how, you talk about the ultimate framework?
Yeah.
How, it's obviously mysterious, it's so deep, but how do we relate to that? In my mind, I'm like, should I crack it? Like, do I go for that? Like, how much time do I spend on that? Or do I just not? And is that cracking it?
So, this is a way we could conceptualize it, kind of a model which is not exactly true, but gives us a way to kind of think about it. And it's why I like the word I, because you can't see your eye with your eye, right? So that ultimate frame is like that. So there's no cracking it in the way that we think about cracking things. It's not like, oh, there's a thunder egg, whack it open. Oh, it was a thunder egg or it wasn't a thunder egg, and let me examine the crystals inside of it. That's like, I have my viewing is here, and then I'm looking at this thing that I'm gonna work with. So what my point here was, the reason that the meditation is so close to the wisdom piece, which is that I, is it provides us provides us an opportunity first to realize, oh, this isn't about cracking an object open. This is about the whole kit and caboodle, which is right. This mirror, which there's nothing outside of it. Now my working with it is not trying to crack it open. It's receiving something from whatever it is that I behold. So whatever it is that presents in my consciousness, that I'm not separate from that, and that how am I going to be? How is this being going to be with the being of whatever it is that's present there? And that itself is a working with that frame. So the practice the purpose of the practice is not to get us to be able to see the frame. The practice's purpose is to very directly work with the frame. So that's why if you take up something like effort in the practice of meditation, for example, when the thing that we're always coming up against is when we turn the effort outward to try to say, okay, my effort's going to be, I'm going to try to sit this many minutes a day or this regularly or whatever, which we need to do. Probably most of us need to do that. If we're going to have a regular meditation practice, we've got to have some of that. But it kind of misses the point, because we're turning the effort kind of unidirectionally. And what we need to do is see, oh, what is vigor or what is effort in the realm of no points, no gold stars, nothing that is going to kind of give me the typical way in which my effort is seen as worthwhile because of whatever I get out of it. And so there would be a place where, that practice of vigor, of applying ourselves to a constant practice, puts us right in this working with the ultimate frame, which is, what are my underlying assumptions about what effort's supposed to give me or not give me? And then how can I orient in the perfection of the effort itself, how the efforting itself is in fact liberating, vitalizing. It's vital. Oftentimes we think, like, if I make effort to get to this place, then my life will be really vigorous and I can do all these things. But that's not how it works, actually. You exhibit the vigor now, and in exhibiting that, then your life becomes like this. There's no way to that place of a vigorous life through other means than vigor. Vigor is the means to vigor. And that's true of all of the perfections or any of the teachings. So that's how we work with the frame, as opposed to trying to understand it. Now, you're a pretty philosophical person, and because I am too, I have found that it's necessary for me to also study it philosophically, because the philosophical part of my mind also needs alignment. And sometimes in the Zen school, there's so much poo-pooing of the kind of intellectual study that can be confusing for us. So that it's just that we go into the philosophical study with actually every line here is orienting me, and I'm not gonna get some secret meaning out of it. There's not some hidden meaning inside the sutra. It's like every one of the lines is just aligning me. And if I'm diligent and I'm lucky, at some point I might be like that sixth ancestor, the kid when he was a sixth ancestor, and it just goes, and that happens, it happens. And then when something all lines up, write it down, and then remember it, like that. We're gonna go rock, scissors, paper.
How does the idea of cleansing karma fit in with the fifth ancestors and the sixth ancestors' claims?
Yeah. So cleansing karma is a basic teaching within Buddhism, right? I keep saying that there's all this baggage, and Buddhism says there's something to do about that. Actually, that karma can be cleansed. When we take the karma as an object of our disdain, it reinforces it. We will replicate whatever that karma is in another fashion. Now, sometimes we can replicate it in a more positive fashion. So that's not always bad. Sometimes we can pick out a behavior or something that we do, and we're like, I need to not do that. In a way, I need to hate that behavior. And I need to realign myself in another direction. But that won't necessarily unlock the karma. It just transforms it from less wholesome to more wholesome. So that process happens. But once then we can clean up some of the more overt unwholesome problem-making type of karma, then the real way to the liberation of karma is through, like one translator called it radical, attentive non-intention. Attentive non-attention. So a state in which we're not hiding anything, but we're not pushing the karma forward. That's where the karma has the capacity to flower and not replicate itself. So classical understanding of meditation is that that's a place in which karma can be exhausted, because it can arise without having to take another form. Now, all of our thinking, in a way, is the pushing the karma farther down the road. Like the karma's arising and we keep thinking about it. So we want to purify it as much as we can, but there is a place in which the karma can arise and the flower simply blooms. That's it. So, so I believe that the sixth ancestor's teaching about that is better, because he says, don't separate yourself from it. Whereas the fifth ancestor's kind of telling you to clean it up. Having said that, you probably need the fifth ancestor's teaching to have the sixth ancestor's teaching. You probably have to realize, like, I need to clean some things up. And then when you realize you need to clean some things up, then the method for cleaning them up is not a kind of process of destruction. It's actually a process of liberating.
Because the sixth ancestor he says there is no dust.
Right. Yeah.
So it's like,
yeah.
He means I take that as there is no ongoing dust that you can grab onto.
Yeah.
It's like it's always changing.
Yeah. So it's changing, and then also it's there's no outside to the mirror. So he says the mirror has no stand. The mirror is the wholeness of everything. So whatever it is that you experience as dust, that is also the bright mind of illumination. If it's the bright mind of illumination, let it be that. Let it open and reveal its luminosity, as opposed to regarding it as something that needs to get wiped away. And that's very delicate in the process of practice, because we could really tell ourselves a story of like, oh, I'm doing all this horrible stuff, or not even that horrible, but just kind of unskillful stuff that makes me miserable, makes other people miserable, and just say, well, there's no dust, man, right? Like, that's not the teaching. The teaching is that, no, if you really pay attention to it, you'll see it's not dust. Whatever that phenomena is, actually is the gem of awakening, but you're meeting it with this karma in a way that it becomes rigid and painful. So in the practice of meditation, that's one of the reasons it's so difficult, because we have to face those places of rigidity and pain and then learn to see them in another way. Not just see them in another way, but be in another way. And that's why all the patience and forbearance and vigor and generosity and in ethics is important. If you think about those places like where we realize something I'm doing that's really not, like I've talked a lot about anger, a lot of the work I had to do around anger, especially as a school teacher, and that'd be a perfect example. It's like I could not meditate my way into something there. I could get pretty calm in meditation, but all it needed is a couple 7th grade boys could like send me over the edge pretty quick. They can send most people over the edge pretty quick, by the way. But I needed ethics. I needed to see that the anger that I would unleash was unwholesome and harmful for them and for me. And when I could see that, then my meditation could do something else. But that ethical work took staying there in that pit. So I did need to do, there's real work that needed to happen to change behavior. But the way to change the behavior was not to hate my hating. The way to change the behavior was to really feel the pain of what that anger was about within me and without of me. And so that's how the transformation happens. You know. And now, I get angry sometimes, but not as much. Plus I'm older, I think that happens too. Less spunk.
What just that?
Uh-huh.
Most of my practice has not been in Zen meditation, but in other traditions, like doing Kundalini breathwork or tantric work. And I feel like what I learned in sitting there is how to dig down into myself and find some connection to peace and aliveness, but very much in a way that felt like it had a method. And so there's like a path, and this is what I do, and this is how I sit, and then I dig a well, and then there's water in the well, right?
Yep.
And what I'm hearing is that this way of practice is sort of a method of no method. And so how do you suggest moving from one to the other?
So I have a friend who has a temple up in Olympia, Washington, and she was telling me once that she oftentimes gets asked to come to the school, oftentimes a university, to give a little talk about Buddhism. That's often what happens. And she said she brought up the habit of always bringing 2 books. She would bring one book, some of you may have seen it, it's a very large book that's about like this, and it has many reproductions of the paintings of Vajrayana Buddhism, different mandalas, and etc., coming out of a Tibetan Vajrayana tradition. And the other one she takes is a book that's on Enso, which is this, you may have seen in Zen, there'll just be a circle that's written with a brush. And so that one's all like a collection of a whole bunch of ancestors' Ensos. And so she always takes those to show to people. She says, it's all Buddhism, but what you're receiving as Buddhism has a lot of different styles. And so she gives a kind of framing. She says, this circle, then she usually would, I think she would show the circle, it's called the Wheel of Life in the Tibetan tradition, and it has all the different realms. It's very complicated kind of explanation about being. And she said, in some schools, all of this explanation helps you to practice your meditation or whatever your work is like this. This circle looks like this, and in the Zen, it looks like this. So the reason I bring that up is because I think it's helpful for us to create, like, okay, what tradition am I practicing in? Even within Mahayana Buddhism or Vajrayana Buddhism, where am I at? And how have different approaches to things, and there's strengths and weaknesses to all of those approaches, different emphasis on things. So oftentimes in the Vajrayana traditions, they want to give someone a taste of peace as quickly as possible. So they'll try to give you a methodology to go, just like you're saying, to go to a place where that living water can be accessed. So the teaching will try to take you there, and then you integrate it in deeper and deeper and deeper levels. In a way, Zen isn't as kind. It says, okay, this whole circle, which the Vajrayana Buddhism is also about, but that whole circle is what the mind is, and that you should practice from that standpoint right from the very beginning. So what I found when I first came back from Japan was I was really, really teaching this way with no handholds, a little bit like I've been teaching today. And what happens is people don't know what to do. And so I got a little bit kinder. And so we have things to do, like how do we work with breath? How do we work with the physical posture? What is the difference to sit in community? What are some things we can do to attend to the mind? And those kinds of teachings. So I guess my straightforward answer would be to come to some of those classes. Come see, if you're meditating here, you can come see me in Sanzen, which is like an individual meeting, or the other teachers, you can come see them for practice discussions or Sanzen. And in Zen Buddhism, a lot of that maturation in practice comes from those encounters with the teachers, where you can bring, like, this is what I'm working with, and then they can draw a circle, and you go, oh, okay, circle, and then you go more to. So there are handholds in all of those places in a way, but they just come to us in a little bit different, kind of a different way. So I encourage you in that way, come to some of those things and then see. I would also encourage you, there's no need to throw away the Tantra, which has become part of your access to that water. If you're not actively continuing to practice in that tradition, probably what will happen is it will start shifting a little bit. You'll start seeing different aspects of it that you didn't see before, and sometimes you might need clarification about that, and you may need to go back to a Vajrayana teacher for that, or you may find that it shifts more to a Zen style of practicing, and I think that's very organic and natural. But I wouldn't encourage you to think that you shouldn't do that or something. That it really can be part of your practice and your journey. Yeah. Okay, one last one. Then we have to finish. Yes.
So how do you take today's teaching off the cushion?
You just get up. Yeah. I mean, I say that kind of like a, kind of as a joke, but also not as a joke. Like, there's nothing to drag from one place to another. It's the same mind that says, I want to meet the wholeness of it. I want to realize that whatever I'm experiencing involves the wholeness of being, that I would practice in a very intimate way while I'm sitting quietly, is exactly the same intimacy, exactly the same practice when we get up and we say hi to our neighbor, or we get in our car, we drive home, we're trying to figure out our taxes or whatever. You're learning about my life. Someone cuts you off. Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. What I learned to do with that one was that I figure, the bodhisattvas of patience. Yeah. One of my favorite writings is Awakening of Faith in the Mahayana, is by Ashvaghosha, one of the great ancestors, Ashvaghosha. And my favorite part of his teachings, he says, once the bodhicitta, once the mind of awakening has arisen, or the mind that seeks awakening has arisen, everything you meet, and then he has this long list, including your mom and dad, and your spouse, and your enemies, and your friends, and everybody, those are bodhisattvas that are appearing to teach you. Yeah. So with that arising of bodhicitta, the whole world becomes our teacher, because the whole world's involved in whatever it is that we're experiencing or doing. And so yeah, we don't have to we have to try hard, but not try hard to try to remember what the teaching is or to try to do this thing in a particular way. We have to try hard to meet the world with that kind of heart.